Well, welcome to another. This is David Gamble. Welcome to another installment of Be Your Own Boss, Design Your Life Your Way. We're here to discuss a person's life and career and what got them to this point. Today, we have another very interesting guest, Greg Duncan, who has been a life and business mentor and a good friend for over 10 years. But before we get to the interview, if you're getting value from this video, please go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps people find this content. And if you're interested in hearing more people's experience of becoming their own boss, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We've got a lot more people's experiences coming your way. Greetings and welcome, Greg. Let's get started with a brief history of how you got started in your own business and what led to those decisions.
Sure. David Gamble, great to see you. Great to be on with you. You know, I'm a big fan of David Gamble. I'm very proud of what you're doing. I'm very excited you're reaching out to people like this. Certainly, our life took some big turns compared to regular old business out there. You know, my gosh, I'm turning 70 this year. So way back when I was a punk, graduated from college at Vanderbilt University. I was 22, of course, and went to medical school at University of Washington in Seattle and was looking to practice medicine, be a full-time in medicine, et cetera. But the world was changing back then. I lived literally a few blocks away from Bill Gates when he was just starting Microsoft. In fact, I used to come home from the hospital, come over the 520 bridge. And as I came over, I was looking at this 4 or 5 story building and just had some small offices in it, right? There were few kids in there, my age, that were starting some business, just what a stupid name, Microsoft. Whoever heard of that, And they had 2 little offices, and they had a big banner made, and they had a rope out each side. So they hung the rope out one window and out the other, and they never got it straight. It was always crooked. So that's as sophisticated as they were. They now have quite a large place back there. They've got quite a campus. So I
Yeah.
think he's done really well. Yeah. So but it was changing the world. I'll never forget him being interviewed on a local news station about, he started talking about something called the internet. He talked about how everybody will use that. And the guy laughed at me. He says, "Oh, you really think people are going to do that?" So that's when the world was changing. And the first people to privately own cell towers lived just north of me, too. So we had one of the first cell phones of anybody out there. It was on a backpack, cost $1,500. It's $3 a minute. Thank God nobody else had a cell phone. My gosh, just $3 was a lot of money back then. It was an amazing time in society to change. And of course, people always think that if somebody gets wealthy in a town, that everybody else gets less wealthy, that the rich people steal all the money. Well, I that's not true. I've always, people go, if somebody eats a bigger piece of pie, then there's less pie left for everybody else. And I've always believed that, when people get wealthy, they become bakers and open bakeries, and lots of people get pies. And that certainly happened in Seattle. Over 2,500 people became millionaires because of Bill Gates and Microsoft and all these companies that served them and all the businesses they opened up. I mean, look at all the businesses. They were able to change their business over to doing things that way. My father owned a construction business in Great Falls, Montana, big city boy. And they had a computer that was just handling their payroll. And of course, it was so primitive, so rudimentary. And it was even back before Bill Gates, it was like an IBM type of computer. Because remember, Bill Gates invented the first personal computer and he actually licensed it through IBM. My dad had a machine that was made by IBM. It was a $60,000 machine. And it's not like he had 150,000 people that worked for him. Got to remember, that was a long time ago. That was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, that was
And
one.
he had like 100 employees. My dad would have 4 job sites going, 25 people at each job site, and they had a payroll every single week, every month, whatever, of 100 people and a $60,000 machine. Unbelievable. And then Bill Gates invents, this software that, today you can do a software for a company with 140,000 people on your phone today. It's ridiculous where it's gone. But it changed the way we looked at things. I loved medical school. I was studying to be a surgeon, a plastic reconstructive surgeon, ear, nose, and throat kind of guy, and liked it. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. And, but the thing that bothered me is I like my wife and I like being with her, and medicine's very demanding. And so we started looking at, okay, I'm not going to practice medicine forever. So let's look at getting out early. Once we started, we hadn't even really started. I was in medical school and going through clerkships and things like that. I wasn't really practicing yet. And but we started thinking, wrote down all different kinds of businesses, and where we would go and what we would do. And we loved the Pacific Northwest. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. It's probably the most beautiful place in the entire country. It's green, but there's a reason it's green. It's because they have a year-long sprinkler system. So that finally got to us. But he tells us the first time I've used that line. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So we eventually left there. We started, what happened is as Microsoft developed and all this online stuff started to develop, the concept of having online businesses started to develop. And the flexibility of that really turned me on. So before I even finished medical school, I left, got started in working with online businesses and some of the things that could happen because of that. And the range of people you could reach. I mean, I could only take care of patients that came to my office in one little place. And now I could reach people all over the country, all over the world. It was massively different. Of course, today I'm so jealous. I'm 70 years old and all these punks out there are doing amazing things. I think the opportunities today in business, David, are way better than they've ever been in the history of our life. I think it's so exciting. I mean, a lot of people are very confused. What am I going to do? But I think that the pandemic really opened up a lot of people's eyes because when I grew up, I'm a little older than you. I'm not sure how it was when you grew up, but
10
yeah.
years to a decade.
But yeah, I'm 70 already. You guys got all this cool stuff. I've only got 4 or 5 decades left, man. I got to drink it up. I'm going to gulp life, not sip it. But the pandemic changed a lot of things for people. I mean, the
Right,
idea was
right.
that somebody get a job at a brick and mortar and work there 40 years of their life. I don't know if you know the history of when we started Social Security. Social Security is supposed to start at 65 years old. You're supposed to retire. That's because when they started in the early 1900s, the average person was dying when he was 68. So, they really only had to have Social Security for 2 or 3 years. And so they go, oh, it's fully funded. And well, the problem is with people now, thankfully people are living longer. But when their job quits at 65 and they don't have another source of income, oh my gosh, what are they going to do? And so that people for the last 10, 15 years have been saying, man, Social Security doesn't work anymore. Well, Social Security works just fine. If everybody die on time, it'd be great, but that doesn't happen. And we're all living longer. And, my gosh, people are projected to be able to easily live into their very late 90s, if not into their early hundreds, and be active. I plan on, snowboarding when I'm 95. I say snowboarding instead of skiing because I hate snowboarding and it's really tough. But if I can snowboard when I'm 95, I can definitely ski. So it's a good thing. I love it. So anyway, that's why and how I got started, and it's expanded all over the world. It was funny as we succeeded with that. People said, "So are you going to go back to med school?" No, I love being with my wife. We're married 46 years, have 2 kids, boy and a girl. We each have 2 kids, boy and a girl apiece, and they're our life. We love it. It's great. And yet we're still very active in our business, but we don't have to physically be places because of the way the world works. So what
Right.
about boy, if I could, I'd go back and start again young today, not because I want to be young to do more, but because the opportunities are crazy good, David. Probably more than you were asking
Yeah.
for.
Do you think that's evolved in one of the things I was always intrigued about, because I've done that same realm of what you had where started with a computer. Yeah, I was able to build my own computers. I was able to, see the growth of technology and just expand into doing, I guess, doing more quicker and actually reaching out to folks quicker. And then social media happened, kind of the reaching out and touching somebody, but people started utilizing social media the wrong way, right? There's a good way and bad ways to do anything. But if you don't have the right mindset and if you don't have the right ways of doing things, you can come across rather I wouldn't say mischievous, but with evil intent or something where you're not really presenting yourself correctly. Is that something you come across dealing with? I know there's people in their mom's basement just texting away as anonymous,
Sure.
trying to ruin somebody's life because because they can repeat a lie or repeat negativity because always say negativity travels faster than the truth.
Sure.
Right. Is that something you've come across as that's
I
in the
don't
new
get
age?
look, it's a reality. It doesn't scare me. Look, anytime anything's invented, there's always a bunch of negative. Hey, when cars were invented, people got upset because the noise scared the horses. Well, guess what? Guess who won? You don't see any horses
Yeah,
on the so it is what it is. I mean, people didn't die in wrecks with horses at 80 miles an hour. So, you got to have seatbelts and you got to be careful and stay in your lane. And, that kind of stuff happens. The same thing with the internet. The beauty of making it work
yes.
when you work it right, but you don't have to travel places. You don't have to leave your
Mm-mm.
family. You don't have to be there. You can be so effective. I mean, when you've got people who understand and you can relate, I mean, we're on I don't know what the name of your service is here, but it's like Zoom. I use Zoom a lot, right? And before COVID, Zoom had 10 million visitors a day. A day. That's not so big. Today, They have close to 400 million visitors a day, every day. I remember when I was first starting to, we would use marketing and being able to handle ordering and stuff online, but we didn't have all the social media when I first started. But, when I first started before COVID trying to get people to use Zoom, they go, "Oh, I just think it's so personal. I don't like being on computers and stuff." Now, you have somebody even meet you at a coffee shop downtown, let alone fly to Phoenix or someplace else. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and you're in Delaware, aren't you?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, okay.
Just
Big
close
city.
to Wilmington.
Delware's this big. Phil Yeah.
It's all
Yeah. Philadelphia's like the 6th biggest city in America, isn't it? It's huge,
yeah, yeah,
right?
it's huge.
Yeah.
It's one of the originals. I was just listening the other day. It's one of the original formed cities in the U.S. I mean, it was actually laid out in the grid before even,
Wow.
I think, even
Yeah,
before New
right.
York and Manhattan. So they'll have the grid,
Yeah.
and it's showing its age, but there was
Yeah,
the
that
original
was
grid
organized in the
pattern.
beginning. If you've ever driven in Boston, they obviously weren't organized, they didn't have a grid. It was that old Boston's a mess, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you don't
Here's
start
what
off right, it becomes a mess rather quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So I
progression
don't
like that. It's so that's an interesting, that's an interesting point, and I think it takes discipline to keep on point. But you always have those negative Nellies, I guess they call them, that always pecks at you, and kind of like
Sure.
that. When you try to reach out to folks, I've come across those folks, and you probably
Oh,
have
sure.
too. You kind of like, man, I can't deal with this person, right? And you can't connect with them, and you say, well, I got to go on to somebody else, right? It's always
Right,
knocking on the door,
and
right?
one of the things so one of the things that people gotta do when they're looking at a guy like you calling them or somebody calling them or being in business with them or talking about being in business, they owe it to themselves to be able to check not only the background of the individual, but the quality of the people that they work with. Because ideally, when you're working online, you've got vendors and things like that you can work with, and the quality of those kind of vendors is a huge deal because there's obviously great stuff out there. Of course, there's bad stuff out there. So hey, we're big boys and girls. Anybody who thinks the internet is innocent, I mean, come on, what planet you been living on? So
Yeah,
they've got to check those things out. And from yours and my point of view, when we're dealing with people and we're finding other people to be our business partners, there's obviously people who say they're ambitious, but they aren't. So, I always just take some time to walk people through some experiences in the basic beginnings of the business to see how they respond and see if they're serious. And if they're not, hey, go and have a great life. But I don't get hung up on it. I'd rather
right,
find out more
right.
about you sooner than later, right?
Yeah. Hey, tell me the rumor or the story of you taking the elevator pitch, going up and down the elevators when you were.
Yeah. So when I went to medical school, well, first of all, when I went to pre-med, in school, I mean, it was tough. I mean, I was born and raised in Great Falls, Montana, and doing well at CM Russell High School, which I loved. It certainly isn't anything. I went to Vanderbilt, and almost everybody I went to school with had gone to private boarding school, so they smoked me, right? I mean, they knew way more about. They came in with better math to Vanderbilt than I left with. And so these guys were amazing. So I joined a fraternity to try to get to know some people and stuff like that, but I never had any time to be there because I was in the library all the time. My guys that I knew were so smart or so well educated. I guess they weren't so smart. They had a higher education than I did. And they'd get blitzed all weekend long and show up Monday and get an A. Man, I studied my brains out to try to just get past that course. I had to take 3 remedial classes at Vanderbilt just to get ready for how to write at that level and how to do math at that level, stuff like that.
Wow.
So
Hey,
I was very absorbed in trying to learn, and getting into med school is very, very difficult. And so when I did that, I didn't have a whole lot of social skills and things like that. So when I first started learning about having internet businesses and working with that and talking to people, I wasn't a talk to people kind of guy.
right.
I had not done that. I had not developed those social skills. I used to ask girls out on a date at Vanderbilt on a Thursday, and they said, that's the night I washed my hair. So I said, how about the next night? And they'd go, that's the night I dry it. In other words, they weren't interested in me. So I obviously was no Casanova, that's for sure. I think my wife married me out of pity. But I had to learn that. So I was in med school, and I was, just getting started. And, so I kind of did both things at once and make sure I knew what I was doing. And after I'd been at it for 6, 7 months, I went, okay, that's it. This is the future. I walked away from med school. But while I was there, I was in clerkship, so I would go from hospital to hospital, and I was practicing, as one of the student doctors there. I wasn't a full medical doctor yet, and so I was practicing that, and I'd be in all these hospitals. I'd be in 3 or 4 hospitals a day, and I'd go up and down the elevators. You know the rule: everybody's supposed to face the door and look at the numbers, and nobody talks. So I
Right.
thought, okay, you're scared to death of talking to people, Greg. Try this. So I would put my back against the door, and the doors would close, and I'd say, so how's everybody today? These guys looked at me like, you're an alien. Get out of our way. We don't want to talk to you. So I put myself in the most embarrassing situation I could. And I went, dude, if you can handle that, you can do this. And so I would purposely do things that were very scary and very painful. Because hey, if I want the end of the story, I'm willing to go through whatever pain there is, right? That's true in anything, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if that's, I mean, that's a good segue because do you have, I mean, you've progressed to finding that what scares you. Do you still to this day know of things that still scare you? That you still want to?
Sure. Yeah, there's things that you either know you're not good at or that scare you. But what I've discovered, and you know this, I mean, you're an accomplished guy, you know, whatever scares you is the compass to where you need to go. That's the part you're
Exactly.
not good at. So I actually welcome that, for goodness sakes. It's like I love sports. I love to ski. I love to ski. It's one of the reasons we live in Utah, because we got a son and a daughter. They live in different places in the country. Our daughter lives in Utah, and our kids are skiing. The snow is here. It's amazing. The mountains are amazing. So I love to ski. And, when I haven't done something that I want to learn to do, I know I'm going to fall. I know it's going to scare the heck out of me, but I'd rather do it because then I learn how to do it. I mean, every part of life is like that, right? Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
is there anything that scares you now that you haven't done yet? Are you at that 70 plus saying, I've done everything? Or do you have still that thing that you
No,
haven't done?
I'm always learning things. I guess I don't get, when I look at something I'm not good at yet, it used to scare me. Now it concerns me to a point. It interests me. So, because what's happening for me is that the approaches or the way I handle business 20 years ago is way old fashioned now, or just
Right.
even 10 years ago, right? And even 5 years ago. So I'm always very interested in what is the current trend. I don't mean, popular kind of trending kind of thing. I mean, what do ambitious people currently think about, and what do they look for, which was very different than what we looked for, right? When I got started and people worked 40 hours a week for 40 years in the same job, in the same company, in the same building, they never changed. That's not true today. They change all the time. So I don't lose sleep at night, but I'm always interested in eye on the cutting edge of giving people what they need. So I'm always looking to change that. I'm better today than I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and sometimes better than last week.
Yeah. I mean, 5 years ago, you'd never told me that I would be doing a podcast. So
Yeah.
I
A
think
what?
the
What?
trend.
What is that? What's a podcast?
Well, 5 years
Right?
ago, you didn't know what a podcast was. This is all new to me as well. And it's kind of like, but I feel like it's a vehicle and a media that everybody is utilizing for communicating their intent and communicating who they are. And it is a mechanism of, we were talking earlier about presenting your true self or presenting who you are. This is a fast way of doing it because,
It's fabulous. Yeah, but we never knew what that was before. We'd never invented that stuff before, right?
right, right. I remember just going into, a store or something and talking to folks and how
Yeah.
odd that would be, just like you saying in the elevator. They look at you like you got six heads. And even today, I could go into an elevator and to do that to people, and they would just look at you funny. It's like,
Well,
go ahead.
they can look for you now. And that's why you doing a podcast is so brilliant, because people can look for podcasts, and that they at their own leisure, their own time, can take a look at what you're offering. So you're really smart to do it this way. So people can come look at what you're doing. They just never had that option before. I mean, I can't get over how things changed. I was with my grandkids talking about music the other day. You think back to old LPs, right? The people used to have. I remember the first 8-track that came out. I mean, people never think about this. We had no way of taking music with us, right?
Oh, no,
My dad
no.
loved Nat King Cole, and he had this fabulous Bose stereo, this B&O stereo. And we'd play those, but we'd go to the car. We couldn't play Nat King Cole. And when the first 8-track came out, my dad got Nat King Cole. And we thought that is
That
the
was the
coolest.
squeeze.
Oh, of course we never had phones or anything like that. We didn't have any of that stuff. Yeah, and then we are
Yeah,
then we
scroll. I mean, right, scrolling on your phone. Imagine that. 10 years ago, or even now with TikTok and all these videos that are just blurts, right? Just like flashes of light that affect your brain. Like, hopefully, it's doing. Like I mentioned before, there's a negativity to it, but there's also, if we can just be the positive influence that gets people, at least the people that want to improve
sure,
themselves or do
sure.
something different, or expand and grow where they want to go. How do I know? How do I know who that is? I mean, it's you go to a store, you get to go in and you talk to folks, and it's kind of like, you're trying to turn on a light bulb. A lot of times, nobody has the lights on, or don't even have the switch to turn on, right? You try to be cordial and friendly, and depending on which part of the country you're in, it could hit and miss rather quickly. And
Yeah,
it's
you can, but the beautiful thing about you having a podcast out there, and I know you do a good job of making it available to a lot of people, is that people are looking are gonna find you, and that's so great. As opposed to walking up to a stranger,
yes,
you're looking, they can indicate, you can say, "Look, here's what we do, what we talk about," and they can identify with that. I mean, I've got my grandkids are, let's see, 10, 8, 7, and 5.
well,
We're very careful about what they do with screen time and stuff, but man,
oh
they
yeah,
look stuff up. They watch podcasts, they watch special educational things on YouTube. They learn how to do things. I was asking one of them the other day, going, "How do you do that?" You go, "Oh, I don't know, but I'll find something on YouTube that'll teach me how to do it." They get back and FaceTime me later and go, "Hey, Papa, look what I did. I did this," and they show me what they did and got that stuff done. I'm thinking,
you
what if,
could never, you could
what if
never have done that when you're their age.
I'm so jealous. Yeah, I'm so jealous of what they've got to do, what they can do. And so, it's very important to us because obviously there are abusive, terrible, horrible things on the internet. So we're just very
Well,
careful.
there is, and we
Oh,
need to check
well, you
them.
got a young daughter, buddy. Holy
I
mackerel. You've got
know.
to be
Don't tell
concerned.
me about that.
Let me see. I won't give her name and address. But
I think she knows more than. I mean, every day I think she knows more than I did when I was her age at 14. I mean, at
yeah, and
14,
have access to more.
I didn't, I didn't even know we had landlines, right? We had, you had the princess phone on the wall. Barely had access to a TV or radio. Radio was like great for me with all the Amos and Andy and all those other like shows that you can listen to. Music videos was the thing up and coming when I was in college.
Sure.
God, but they just shut down like 3 or 4 of the MTV music TV cable shows because it's becoming nobody watches it anymore. So it's forever churning. And to think what you did 5 years ago is still prevalent today, and
Sure.
that you can actually reach out to somebody, it's totally different. The culture is progressing.
Well, I think a lot of people are smart enough to figure out that if they get their head together and stop wasting it doing stupid things, that they can do more with this kind of thing. That's why a guy like you is helpful because you understand this stuff. You understand a lot of this podcast stuff better than I do. But it's great how they can do that kind of stuff. I remember I was watching a show about the Kennedy Center and in Houston, where they were launching stuff to Apollo rockets and stuff like that. And they, Houston, we have a problem. They were talking about the room they had that did all of the computer work for the launch, and it was a room. It was a large room, bigger than my office here. And literally today, my telephone. I mean, they talked about how many bytes and kilobytes and stuff.
And
My
operations and
yeah,
instructions, and yep,
yeah, my phone has 1,000,000 times the storage and
it's
computing power as that room did. That is crazy. So why don't we use that? I mean, I think there are a lot of people. Look, there's a lot of stuff you hear, and there's a lot of people you're not using this and they're wasting their life. But I think there are millions of people out there who are
yeah.
hungry and ambitious and ready to go. And they were looking for people like you.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be ambitious. You have to be asking you questions, and I've come across those folks, and I've tried to keep in touch with them. Right?
Sure.
That's the I guess the one thing I love about social media is not that I just follow everybody. I mean, I only follow people I want to follow,
Right.
I do try to reach out to them and see if there is any connection or any. I guess the term is, I actually don't know what the term is, but it's like, are they ready to do something different? Right. And that's always been, are they at the point where they're ready to do it? A lot of folks not. They're not there yet. They're not. Maybe it's fast approaching, but I have read some reports that younger generation are more interested in starting a business or side business because they
Well, I
real
think especially because they're not interested in doing what their parents did.
correct. They realize that they can't get that 40-year job
Yeah.
anymore, right? They can't get a career that's going to be satisfying, right? Because they see it through their parents or friends or relatives that that's not a career or a position that they can carry through or
Well,
rely on.
their parents are locked in. Everybody in the neighborhood leaves at the same time. They're gone for 8 hours. They
Right,
come same time,
right.
and whatever business these people pursue, because they use the internet, because they're using technology, they can say, "Hey, if in the middle of the day I feel like taking a walk or playing a game of tennis, I can do that because they control their life." And I think people are hungry for that.
Yeah, and I think they're not only doing the jobs, I also think they're re-looking at the way they want to live their life, right? It's an opening of that, I wouldn't say in a good way, the Pandora's box that, yes, I can do what I want to do and not be reliant on somebody else to give me what I need.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So I think there's a cultivation of a renewed, you kind of the next wave of going from farming to going to an industrial, mass production to
right.
now it's being, just being more creative, more of the art. I wouldn't say arts and Lobo, but kind of more of the being able to do what you feel comfortable with, right? Go for your strengths and improve on it, right? You can really provide that, but give you the mechanisms to be able to support that.
Well, that's what's so great about what Bill Gates started with Microsoft, and there's so many other very smart people involved in it, but you're right. We went from an agrarian society where everybody had 11, 12, 13 kids because they all needed to make the farm work, and then they built cities because they could bring people together and they could all build businesses. The problem with those businesses, somebody else owned them, and that's what we essentially, we created the concept of employee. Those 12 kids on the farm weren't employees. We created employees. The problem for employees is they could never afford to walk away and start their own company and stuff. And
Correct.
what happened is now this is your company. This company is better, faster than any big building anywhere else, and you're the owner and you totally control that. And I think there's people hot to use that.
I mean, it'd be detriment. I mean, we live next to Amish country, and they have an interesting, they don't necessarily like the technology, but they allow their kids at a certain age to basically bury themselves into it. Because I see them walking around at like 17, 18-year-olds that are on the phone, and I think then they get it. I forget if they give them a choice at a certain age, like 21 or so, is whether or not they want to come back to the
Sure.
Amish community, or do they want to just veer off into the city, the big city type of
Sure.
mentality?
Sure.
So that's probably something totally different for them as well. But they've been kind of embraced it because they
Yeah.
know that that's something that you don't necessarily keep them away from it. You just allow them to absorb it and see how they, and with an eye of, like we do for our kids, just supervision, right? But you
Sure.
you don't you
Sure.
don't shy away from it, and I think
No.
we need to do that, right? And we need to reach out to those folks that's there, but they don't need to be, sometimes cultivated
Right.
to buy certain products for us, and unless, but with the intent of, we help you in order to help us, to help
Sure.
you and I.
Sure.
And it's the only way that community works, right? If we didn't have that, I mean, that's the bartering system
That's actually
on
right.
technology steroids. If you really do it well,
Yeah.
and it benefits everybody, and all ships, all, what was it? The ships, floating, every ship floats. Or I forget the name of
That's
the
right. Yeah. Rising tide
all
raises ships.
all ships, right? So if we
Yeah.
raise all ships, then everybody benefits, right?
Yeah,
But if we
the one
don't,
thing I
we
have
miss out.
that I look to try to find out differently than people for people is that, when they go sign up for a job in the traditional corporate, big tower in the big city, is they don't I don't think a lot of them appreciate that the people that had to start those businesses, a lot of them could inherit it from daddy, but a lot of them had to start, in a garage, trying to make it work for decades to
Right,
try to get the
right.
business big enough that one day they could have an office. So you go apply for a job and they give you a desk and you get a paycheck the next day. Well, the problem with people starting new businesses like you run into is that, they start from bare naked scratch and they expect it's like, well, I've been building a business of my own with a web podcast for a week. Where's my paycheck? No, 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 baby. You start at
Right.
brand new scratch. I was reading an article about how over 65% of people in this country, if you ask them, are you ambitious? They go, yeah. And I think that's really true. I think they truly think I'm ambitious. But the way I define ambition and the way they define ambition is totally different. I think they're saying, yeah, I'm ambitious to live the lifestyle of David Gamble, but and what I'm looking for is, no, will you do the work and pay the price that David Gamble paid? Will you do that? And they don't understand that. So I ask them those kind of questions. How do you think this is going to go? What are you expecting to find? And I think a
Exactly.
lot of them have to learn. And so I'm looking for the kind of people. Hey, I get this. I'm willing to start from scratch and dig through the dirt to make things work. Yeah, it's going to be a lot faster, a lot better, and the end result's going to be a lot better than anything we've had in our lifetime. That's why I'm so jealous of these guys, but
Yeah.
because they've got so much opportunity. But we just got to find ways to reach. And you asked me what I'm afraid of. I'm always interested in. I know I'm always concerned, interested, afraid, whatever, of missing being able to share with them what it really takes. Because once they find out what it really takes, I find people in this age, I think, are pretty dang ambitious. They really are. They would
I I
really.
think I think you're right, and I think it's the getting them connected to the right folks that are going to actually help them, rather than somebody who's going to help them. I wouldn't say the word utilize them, but kind of like dupe them. And I
Yeah,
think there's that element that people are cautious about, which is great. You have to ask the questions. You have to. I mean, in any business or any way of doing that, and that's what some of the things we teach our daughter is that you're by yourself, right? You can't rely on somebody else. You have to ask the questions. You're the determination, and if you don't, there's a possibility that you could be hurt, and
yeah.
it could be as simple as emotional. It could be physical, but it there could be something that if you don't know the ropes, right? That's I always say, if you don't have the experience, there's always the likelihood, and life is a risk, and you've got to. I mean, granted, my childhood was I still hark on watch sci-fi a lot. Star Trek is like life is a risk, right? You always go into the void. You don't know everything, right? You really don't know everything when you go into something. It's the idea of doing it to find out whether or not it goes through A or B or path or it uh, but without doing it you're fearful all the time. You're like that's the reason why you always try to look for something that scares you, because that's usually the direction you need to be heading. And you're
I
going
think there's
back
a lot of
going back to
people
what
who are
you just
willing.
said.
I think there's a lot of people out there willing to learn. You got to work through who is serious and who's not. And I don't mind asking them those questions up front because it's amazing how many of them have no concept. And when there's work involved, a lot of them run away, but there's a lot that still want it.
Well, and then, well, and the other thing we fight, and maybe that's changing, is they say, well, people's attention spans are short, right? 2 to 3 minutes is what but people still watch 2 hour movies, right? And there's
Yeah,
still
yeah, yeah.
Avatar and stuff. That's over almost 3 hours, but people still sit and watch it because
Yeah,
it's
a good
entertaining.
director makes that interesting from the first 3 minutes.
Yeah, right.
You and I have learned that. We were talking about elevators, but elevator pitches today, you got to get to the point and get to it fast. You can hold on to them for hours, but you can't afford to lose them in any 2 minute period of time.
Correct, and sometimes it's the microwave age. I didn't, that was a new term even for me growing up, because you had to wait for the water to boil the eggs, to boil the pasta. I mean, you just had to do something else while you're waiting for
Sure.
the water to boil.
Don't
And I
watch it. Don't watch it.
don't watch it. Yeah, don't watch water boil. That's right. It just takes too long. And I think and you can attest to this, as you grow older, you start to realize that and you start to pace yourself and not expect everything to come at once. And I
Sure.
think the next generation, I think is clamoring for that, as you said, and I think are like just hungry for that. It's just trying to find those folks who are, willing to do it, willing to do something different, and not to be saying that they well, 2 things. Sometimes, what they're doing is it actually, giving them what they want,
Right?
and have they spent too much time into it and really not learned anything from it? Yeah, because one of the things I want to bring up is about, pivoting. I think that's one of the things you're mentioning is that, you do something for so long and it becomes not scary anymore. Well, you may need to pivot to something else that still gets you to point B because there's no such thing as a straight line, right? There's no straight line from point A to point B. It's maybe roundabout to C and D before you even head back to B of
Sure.
being able to be successful in what you're doing. Have you come across those type of situations where you've had to backtrack or pivot to something else before you actually got your what you're trying to accomplish done?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I always encourage people to do is make sure you've outlined very specifically what you expect to get out of something. And if you're not getting it, you need to, look in the mirror, self-evaluate and pivot immediately. I mean, don't waste years for goodness sakes. Don't even waste weeks, sometimes days. I mean, you're always gonna have a day that doesn't go well here or there, but you know, pivot and make sure you're being productive. I find when people will force themselves to be very honest and ask themselves, "Am I being productive and getting where I want to go?" Because I don't think anybody's good enough to do anything from scratch that they're going to be perfect at it. But they can say, "Okay, 10% of what I did was really good. Let's do more of that. But I've got to pivot on this other 90%." If they'll do that, I think that almost anybody anywhere with any kind of background can end up doing great things with their life. They've just got to be disciplined enough to do the pivot you're talking about.
Well, I think you hit a nail on the head as far as being honest with oneself. Because I'm starting to be able to feel whether or not the person's being honest. I wouldn't say honest to me. A lot of times I can talk to them and saying, "Are you being even honest to yourself where you want to be?" Right?
Yes.
Like when those comes to be, I'll point out to them, but if they can't see themselves in the mirror, I'm off. Right? It's kind of like come back when you find out who you are, because it's kind of hard to anything I'm going to tell you is just going to be right over your head, right? Just and
Sure.
okay, bye. Come
Yeah,
back when you're available to understand when I'm going to talk to you again, because
good.
it's the learning process is you've got to be hungry and you've got to be able to put in the time. But
Well, that's what I find. The people you wanna do business with is I'm not looking for people that I'm gonna be their mother and I'm gonna oversee everything they do. I'm looking
right,
for people who I can empower and encourage and can ideally do things better than what I do. So they've gotta be willing to do those things. They've gotta be willing to do the scary things. They gotta be willing to be honest with themselves. They gotta be willing to pivot. And that's what you do. You can help guide people do that. That's what I do. I can help guide people do that. And I love it. My ultimate goal is that eventually I become unnecessary because they've learned how to do it themselves. And that was the goal with our kids, right? That they didn't need us to be their mommy and daddy forever. Our
well, yeah,
kids.
yeah, the kids are the easiest example of that, right? It's kind of like you
Oh,
you gotta,
oh,
you gotta can't be a helicopter parent. You
oh,
can't always be over them because if they can't experience the examples of failure, they learn nothing. And it's
that's a gift you give your daughter, right? You're ready.
exactly
You're right there. She knows you're there to catch up, but you're not going to hold on to this all the time. She's got to learn to
yeah,
balance on her own. And because of it, your daughter's going to leave you in the dust. I mean, ideally, she's going to be way better than you and your wife are, right?
right,
Like our
right,
kids are way better than, I know your daughter's
yeah.
younger than our kids. Our kids are in their 40s, but wow, that's your daughter's, I think, a teenager or something, right? Isn't she? Yeah. That happened too quick, didn't it? That happened way too quick. That happened way too quick, didn't it? She's gonna be amazing because of it. I know you're good parents.
Yeah. So that's just interesting tidbits that Greg, you can always bring to the table. And I kind of appreciate your time. I don't know if you can maybe may have anything for closing. This has been a good conversation. Is there anything you want to close out with?
Well, I just appreciate what you do. I think that doing a podcast like this and making yourself available for people who are truly looking, and so they can listen to something like this and realize what you're not looking for, what you are looking for. And because there's a lot of people who are going, I can't find people that think the way I do. And I think there's a lot of people who are very driven, who are going to identify with who you are. And I love it. I'm so glad you're doing this. And it was a great honor for me to be on here today. Thank you, my brother.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. And the audience, thanks for joining us, and see you next time. Take care.
God bless, buddy. See ya. Bye bye.